have these 2 days of sharing between each other. So I would like to thank a special word to Oeiras Valley, the municipality of Oeiras, to our platinum sponsor Valvian, to our gold sponsors Deloitte and Magma Science, and also to the more of 18 sponsors that we have in the silver and bronze classes. So today we will have a great day. We will start on IP, then we will have a session in Portuguese about rare diseases to understand the Portuguese context, and we'll end the afternoon with a great topic, investment and M&A. So I really wish you a great day, enjoy the day, keep networking, and please interact also with the great speakers that we'll have today. Thank you very much.
We will now start our first roundtable of the day with the theme Boosting Biotech Inventions through IP and Licensing. The session will be moderated by Professor Isabel Rocha from Nova University, and the panelists will be Claas Junghans from Mittepatent, Joana Piriquito from NLP, and Nuno Prego Ramos from Cellmabs and Valvian. Unfortunately, Jan Demolder from VIB was also invited to speak at the event, but he had a health issue, so he couldn't come. But we have very good speakers for today, so welcome you all. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Simão and Filipe, for inviting me, for organizing this, and for the introduction. Thank you all, the members of the panel, and which I will introduce in a bit more detail in a couple of minutes. So the idea of this roundtable is to discuss how IP, what are the contributions of IP to the valuation of biotech, when should we patent, how should we patent, if we should even submit any patents depending on the business in biotech, and topics related. I think we are all aware that looking at Portugal, the patent applications, if we look at just the applications for international patents, have been growing actually quite exponentially in the beginning of the year, the decade of 2000, and they have been still growing. And this is the role of biotech and related topics has been very significant. Actually, biotech has been ranked third, fourth or fifth among all the technologies in terms of international patent applications from Portuguese institutions, which is a share that is higher than in most European countries. So it seems that in terms of creating technology that can be protected and doing the steps for the protection, we are somehow picking up. Although there are still a few points that I would like to bring and that might be part of our discussion, we have still a significant part of the international patent applications that are made by universities or research institutions, and this share is higher, or much higher than in many other countries in Europe. And we are talking, it depends a lot, of course, on the year, but we can be talking about 50% compared to 10% in Europe. So this is quite significant. And although we don't have official numbers in terms of licensing, from my experience and from the experience of talking with colleagues, for example, when we talk about all these patents that are developed within research institutions, how many of those are subject to licensing agreements? We are talking about a very small part, although this has also been growing. So we will be discussing this and other topics in this session. So this was just aperitif. And we have a very nice group of diverse backgrounds here. I'll start with Nuno on my right. So Nuno, Prego Ramos, I guess most of the audience knows, is the former CEO of Cellmaps, which is a spin-off from Nova University that signed the largest technology transfer agreement by a Portuguese company in the field of biotech. And Nuno now is involved in many other endeavors in terms of promoting biotech and exploiting IP, and I think he will share this a bit. So Joana Piriquito Santos, she is a patent attorney, but also with training in pharmacy. Is that right, Joana? And she has been working at, she's actually a managing partner at NLP, and has been working with some of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies on topics related with IP, with licensing and litigation. And last but not least, Claas Junghans, I hope I have pronounced it correctly, is a patent attorney in Mittepatent, who has been working with many different clients worldwide, including academia, startups, and large industry. And he has also been working a lot with Portuguese institutions. So thank you very much to all the three of you for being here. So I would like to start asking a question to Nuno. I am sorry for this. Asking a question to Nuno. A more generic question, which of course the both of you can also add. Nuno, we have been talking about IP, but IP plays very different roles in different subsectors of biotech, and in some areas it's actually essential. How do you see that strong IP, and maybe you can tell us what you think about strong IP, what is it? How does it impact the valuation and especially the attraction of funding in biotech startups?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for those who come, or those who came today. We do know it's early in the morning, and it's good to see that so many interested people were able to make the effort to attend. So thank you for that. I mean, IP is of course critical in biotech. You cannot raise capital and talk to investors if you don't have a strong IP. Of course, we can always ask ourselves when is it the best time to patent, because of different timings. Of course, it definitely impacts the deal, and I'm not going to go too much into that. I'm sure we're going to be discussing this later. But I do think that it's critical to, especially in academia, I think it's very important for people doing research to start thinking early about what they have that can actually be patented. To give you my own perspective, I think it's always good to give practical cases. I had experience licensing from academia, of course. I don't know if this is the best experience or the best situation to share with you, because actually we had a very good experience negotiating with Nova. I'm kind of biased here. I think I've always been very open about how that negotiation went through and the support that we had from Nova. So I imagine different universities work differently. But one of the things that we've realized is that sometimes patents, mostly, they are put together by the researchers. it usually it takes a toll later down the line, because when they're put together, mostly like papers are also put together, you eventually make yourself vulnerable to different litigation strategies or to different attacks from third parties. So it's always good to talk before starting with tech transfer officers and to people that eventually, and I do think, in my own perspective, I think it's good to talk to already, even though it's expensive, to patent attorneys that can actually help you, even though tech transfers are getting increasingly good. But I really want to make sure, I just want to stress this out without taking further time. I think it is important to patent as soon as possible, but allow the technology to also generate further patentable technology so that you can put together a family of patents. I think it's good that you start doing something, that you start patenting something, that you start protecting yourself, but allow the technology also to grow as much as possible and think ahead when putting an IP in place. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe picking up on that part of the universities, because as I said in the beginning, in Portugal we are talking about universities and research centers as having a major role in owning and protecting IP, and a lot of the IP portfolio of startups then comes from universities. So Joana, my feeling is that often in a country like Portugal, it's people are not so much necessarily aware of what the best practices are in terms of licensing, negotiation, and that happens a lot because we don't have that many. We haven't had that many deals in the past. How do you? What is your opinion about that? Are those best practices well known? How difficult it is to negotiate with universities? And then, Claas, you could also comment because you have also experience on that.
So first of all, now it's working. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's good to be in one of these events and see so many familiar faces yesterday and today. One clarification, I was promoted today. I'm not managing partner of NLP, I'm just a partner. And then what I...
Congratulations.
No, I was not promoted.
Okay, sorry. so it was a mistake. Okay.
Yeah. Just to clarify that.
It was miswritten.
And then, just to add something to what Nuno was saying, first about good patenting. First, what is a patent? So I think it's important to start from the beginning. IP, intellectual property, in this century, it's not just about patents first. So it's like know-how, trade secrets. And when we talk about AI, it's also algorithms and databases. And this is really important in the biotech field. So it's not just about patents. And when we have a patent, we need to understand that it's like an agreement between the states and the inventor. I give you an exclusive right for 20 years. And in the opposite side, you need to disclose your inventions. So that's the deal. And when we have this in mind, we need to consider, like, of course, inventors are really important when drafting, when helping to draft the patent applications. But I think it's really a team sport, because sometimes patenting is not the best strategy. So you need to have a team with an holistic view of the technology, someone that really is digging in the technology, a patent attorney that understands the legal aspects of the patent filing, then business. So you need to protect the product on the shelf, you need to guarantee that you really have in your patent, what is going to be important when evaluation. When we go to medicines and therapeutics, the importance of patents is evident. So in order for a pharmaceutical product to reach the market, we can have like 10 to 15 years and billions of investment. So it would be impossible to have pharmaceutical companies investing all this money in a product with so many failures. Even when we reach clinical trials, only like 12% and approved, and even the ones that are approved, only 1 or 2 will generate revenue enough to guarantee that all the costs invested in research and development are met. So I have no doubt that of the importance of IP rights when in the valuation or investment of a biotech and pharma company. With regard to your question on licensing, when I started 15 years ago in a technology transfer officer in Coimbra, so it was a startup incubator, but close to the research institutions, the whole idea was to learn. So there was a program between Portugal and Austin, Texas, for technology transfer officers, everyone. The idea is to gain experience. I see a lot of people that was there here today, or even in patent firms, or even lawyers, they all came from this. So it was a bet from the state to invest in technology transfer 15 years ago. And at that time, it was rare, indeed, to have real or a billionaire licensing agreement. But the fact is that I think it's changing. So yesterday someone was saying that we are navigating a new wave. So it's important. We now, technology transfer offices need to are more professional, more sophisticated. It's not just about licensing agreements. It's like a full orchestra of agreements, NDAs, material transfer agreements, sponsored research, collaboration agreements. So it's all of this. And when we talk about licensing agreements, I don't know if you want to discuss this later, but we now are going to need to understand the best practices. I was reading an Harvard study from 2019 on the trends to be a successful TTO or the negative aspects that don't facilitate the success of technology transfer. And it was clear that for trends of success was multi-layer collaboration. So we need to have private sector, public sector, small companies, bigger companies, all working together. We need to have TTOs and companies equipped with people that really understand the technology. And when I say technology, it's not about what I'm going to patent or the business, it's like the regulatory aspects. So a lot of medicines fail not because of the patents, but also because of the clinical trials. It's important to have funding, it's important to have policy, it's important to have infrastructures. We were talking in the last time we met Nuno about that. And on the other side, about the negative trends in technology transfer, where we had this conflict of interest, so companies and TTOs were not able to work together because of some conflicts. We had not that there was no cross-functional and holistic approach to the patenting and the strategy for technology transfer, like having a full team of very different people working together with the same aim, and this lack of experience on the regulatory aspects. So in my opinion, and I started to work in this a long time ago, it's important to have like someone like a real vision, a purpose. So if we want Portugal to be in the biotech sector and to be a real important one, it's important to have a clear vision, a purpose, a collaboration, and everyone working together.
Let me just make things a bit concrete. Maybe you can comment. I've seen deals are being made or not made in terms of licensing, for example, for health or but even any biotech, where people are not taking into consideration the market or the risk, and the TTOs expecting to receive a lot on milestones, which are not, and assuming that the milestones are not depending on the market size. So having seen some example of a very big milestone and then assuming that any other deal will be made based on that. And my experience is that although there has been a lot of growth in training people and people, we can now make patents. When it comes to the licensing, there is not a book telling you how to do, because making a deal with a startup is totally different than making a deal with a big company. And then people don't have enough experience in the country to know how this should be fine-tuned. I don't know if you have had any experience on that, but I was just adding that to make clear that what you were mentioning really in some cases is that I've seen is a struggle, but of course not in all, I guess. Do you want to comment, Nuno?
I just want to add to that. I think it depends a lot, not only of the industry, but also where you are. I mean, where the technology is. If you're a small biotech and you're trying to license it out, it's a bit different. If you're thinking about as academia, I think it becomes a bit more complicated. But if you think that several institutions don't have enough money to pursue applications, that becomes a problem. Mm-hmm. Costs start to be a burden. Then there's this huge urge to license out as much as possible. And sometimes you can do bad deals, and sometimes you need to let it go, for a cost that is not even aligned, or for a value that is not aligned with the market. But if you're actually trying to boost the ecosystem, you're trying, as you are, Isabel, trying to boost the ecosystem and licensing out to spin-offs, I think the strategy is a little bit different. And I do think that TTOs are much more, I think, aware that they cannot do the same as they would do with a big pharma company. And even with big pharma companies, I'm speaking from experience, we negotiated with several ones, only one actually, signed with us. But it depends. They can have deep pockets, but they also might want to mitigate risks. You can share, you can try to negotiate different types of terms with companies. I think what you cannot do, and I think that we should try to have as much as possible, is BD close to TTOs, international BDs closer to TTOs. I think it would be good to, instead of just putting together all of the TTOs, because usually that's what happens. All the TTOs talk with all of the TTOs, and then they stay kind of in a bubble. I think that if we could, I don't know if this was for me to shut up quickly, but I'll take it as a yes. But I think that we should try to bring closely together external innovation from pharma companies and TTOs, and I think that, for example, the Bio Europe could be a very good opportunity for us to get everybody together in a room with external innovators from different pharma companies. Just a suggestion, I just remember that. But I think that it could be eventually interesting to kind of understand how they negotiate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point to...
Isabel, I want to add something. I think it's important. I work really close with technology transfer offices, and I think the majority of them is doing a really great work, considering that they are sometimes understaffed. So it's not easy to have to get an idea, control the funding, all the groups that you have this culture of innovation and patent protection with inventors, so with leads of research. So they need to manage all of this, and at the end they have 10, 20, sometimes licensing agreements with different milestones, and it's difficult to have people auditing those milestones. So it's something that is, I think it's really important. Like, okay, if we want that TTOs to be in this ecosystem and boosting even more the transfer of technology, to give real conditions for people to do that.
Okay, so we already have some nice tips, of both in terms of helping the TTOs, but also bringing BDs to the ecosystem to help in this management. So, Claas, maybe you would like to comment some of the things that were said, but I have one specific question for you. Of course, we are talking about licensing agreements, how IP helps on the valuation or is essential for the valuation of biotech companies. But often or sometimes the problem starts with the patenting itself. So we already mentioned what is it to a good patent. So how do you comment on that? So in Portugal we also made a long way since the early days when the inventor was writing the patents, and now that we have people that know how to write patents, but often we may have experts in biotech, but not necessarily in that specific topic helping on the patent. How do you comment on the role of experts and how to write a good patent?
Thank you. First of all, thank you again also from my side to be here. I think these things go together, the valuation and what is a good patent, and I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that the driving force behind the final valuation in terms of what you get out as an inventor and as the institution is luck. And that's a really sad thing because it's absolutely beyond our control. For the last 20 years, I've been writing patents as a profession, and I make my money from that. But I still have to say that my experience tells me that the most important part of it is luck. And to give you an example, the first patent I ever wrote, or patent application, I should say, was more than 30 years ago. I did not have a training as a patent attorney. It was about stuff that happened in the lab where I was doing my PhD, and it was, in hindsight, a very unprofessionally done patent. And because of incredible luck, we ended up starting a company and exiting on the stock market very quickly for those times in '97. And it was valued enormously high. And it was not that the patent was good, and it was not that the invention was particularly brilliant. It was just the right moment. And right now it is dubious whether it's a good moment or not, but it is certainly useful to have relatively well-made patents. And by the way, you have very good people, even in your own team. And you have, I'm seeing this with astonishment, you have a fast-growing ecosystem of good law firms. So I think there you don't need to worry at all. But the main thing is luck and then good inventions. And the problem with this combination of luck and then all the other things that go into a successful project, my personal view of having many thousand of academic applications supervised and myself is the key to success is doing as many as you can. And doing on a small budget means that you just need to keep costs brutally down. So I would rather go with the team that you have and try to get as much expert advice in concentrated little bursts as cheaply as possible than to think that you can spot the right invention and then concentrate all your resources in it and get a really good international law firm and do that. That is not going to work. That was the one thing. A comment to what Nuno said. a lot of it I totally agree with. The one thing I would like to emphasize a little bit more, I'm not sure whether this got through as much as I would like to have it seen elaborated, is the point about patenting early. Yes, early at the right time. I would say early is just before publication. And we know that in the academic sphere, the driving force for every inventor here is publication, because it's a less risky way of promoting your work than starting a company. So the publication is what should also drive the patent application. But then making that a relatively narrow application, because what you said is a very, very important part. Any work, any process of starting a company or promoting an invention in life science invariably takes many years. And I am now in a couple of projects where the earliest invention disclosure may have started 10 years ago. It is now a company. It may now have been funded with 100 million. And we mainly work for Swiss clients, so this is where a lot of big money comes in. Some of these companies have now shrunk again, but in no instance that I remember is the invention that or the application that covers the product that went into phase 2 part of the first patent. So I would see the first application as sort of a box that captures a nice invention and brings it to someone who can take this further, build the team, fund it, and as you don't know whether that's going to happen or not, just give it as many tries as possible and make a lot of cheap applications from the university.
That is a very good point, which actually is related to something that, with what we have already discussed, but I would like to go a bit deeper on that. What is the best timing to patent? I think you already gave an amazing tip, but maybe you'd like any of you to comment on how patenting too early really can affect your business model, in the sense that often, again, in Portugal we are in this case where 50% of the IP comes from universities, so researchers want to publish, and what you said is the right timing is before publishing. That's true, but if you didn't have to publish, in an ideal world, maybe the patent would come out ideally like 1 year later or even more. So does it make sense to think about changing a bit our academic system in some specific cases, or if we do what you just suggested, that is to narrow the first application and then leave room for discoveries? Do you would like to comment how to balance these things? Or maybe you are not even talking about, because actually yesterday we were discussing this, the best patenting is before publishing or as late as you can. What does it mean as late as you can? Are we forgetting that other people can patent what we are doing if we are delaying this because we want to have more time in the market with exclusivity, and because it takes 10 years, or it depends on the field to develop? Would you like to comment on this balance?
Yeah, I can comment. So first, something Claas was saying is that we indeed is a patent portfolio. So we work in our firm mainly in patent litigation for big pharma companies, so on the patentee side. And we know that at the end we will have like a compound patent, formulation patent, second medical use patents. So everything is at stake in different stages. Of course, when we think about patents, we also have other kinds of exclusive rights coming from the regulatory framework. But So it's not just about one patent. So he's completely right that when we are, if we are in clinical trial stage, what is really important is find the right timing. Now about the right timing to file for a patent. It's very difficult to anticipate the market. So when we have a case in court, or before the IP court, or before the Unified Patent Court, in principle, we are discussing 1 or 2 patents, so the ones that are really contested by, for instance, by generic companies. And one of the things that we are seeing is that it's about disclosure. So as I was saying, the whole point of the patent is in exchange of this 20 years monopoly, I will give you the disclosure of the invention. So what is the disclosure? And when we have a patent, some of the biggest discussions throughout Europe on patent litigation is when we file for a patent and have the compounds, do we need to have the technical effect, the mechanism of action, this is enough? Or do we need to have some preclinical data there, or some even clinical data? So, and this is a big discussion called plausibility issue, so it's not just, it's not a common word, but it's like plausibility, because you need to have an invention, in fact. And for you to have an invention, you have to have this utility. So something that really shows that you have not only the compounds or the sequencing of a gene, but also some application in order for you to have this. So you need to be in the moment where publishing is not your priority. You need to be aware of these deadlines of publishing, but you also need to be prepared to wait a little bit in order for you to have a patent that really has the disclosure of the invention, but not too late. And that's why inventors need to work together with patent attorneys in order for them to know the case law at that point, or the European Patent Office, how they are assessing this, to guarantee that we will have a nice patent and at the end it will be revoked, because it's not just being granted. So if you have a really big invention, it will end in court, and that's the ones that we should want.
Great, thank you very much. Maybe we can go back to a slightly different topic that was already addressed very superficially, which is other types of IP protection different from patents, and how do they play a role in the different biotech sectors. Some examples were mentioned here about AI, but even in biotech, when we talk about a process and not a product, it's very difficult to pursue this IP. What do you advise in those cases, and maybe connecting this with a topic that I would like to also to bring, which is the geographical coverage. Well, when we talk about patents in some specific areas, we tend to cover Europe, US, and then we select a few other markets. And we all know that in Asia, in China, things are not working in some areas as we would like. So how do you how can you protect your IP if it is not a patent? When would you advise otherwise, and how geography plays a role? Yes, Claas.
Okay, thank you. So 2 different questions that in my view, don't have anything to do with each other. The first one, patentable matter, do you always go for a patent? If you can, yes. I'll give you a really crass example, which happened sort of in my personal life, and I will tell you how I'm informed about this. Someone that I know and I have worked with when I was still in my startup, had the best magnetic particles as we tried and tested that we could find, probably in the world. Some technician in a small lab in my city, and he knew that he had paramagnetic particles that were much better than the ones that Mittepatent commercialized, and he was not a great friend of this guy, and he made them for the local scene. And even back then, we suggested that he patent. He didn't. And after a struggling life for 20 years, he had a big success, and he sold a huge batch. He made a big contract on the back of great experimental results with a leading Swiss diagnostics firm, and then went into his lab. He was the only guy who had the recipe to do this. Went into this lab to do that batch that was going to give him 3 million, I think it was, and he had a stroke and he died. And this is how we got involved, only on the outside. And it was a big tragic moment for his team. It sort of annihilated the value that he had worked for all his life. That's the most extreme form of what can happen. The much less extreme form of what can happen is that it's a team of people who know how something is done, and one of them gets annoyed with the others and leaves. And that because it is in their head, and they can do whatever is in their head when they leave, it's basically gone. And the competitive edge of the company may have gone. So I think it is worth patenting. And I think what Joana said and has said repeatedly bears repeating again. There's a balance between what you get and what you give. And in order to get the exclusivity that you need in order to, particularly when you come from a relatively poor, i.e. academic, maybe a Southern European background, and your father is not like the owner of a multi-million cement factory and can protect you, the protection that you get from the patent system must be equilibrated or balanced by the fact that you give something. So I'm a great fan from just putting everything out on the table and playing by the rules. Geography, the other thing. Think of any patent, and I'm coming back to what Nuno said about this being a growing portfolio and thinking, and you said it also, there's a compound patent, and then there's a use patent, and then there's a patent of formulation, and then in the pharma, for instance. The first one, the one that puts you on the map, that one that puts you into maybe a little a startup of your own, must be done at the smallest budget possible because you have so little money. And there, what every academic institution that I work for does is they patent in Europe and the US and nowhere else, maybe in Japan. And then you alluded to the doubts about China. I don't have the legal doubts about China, but the most budget application in China that I know of costs you about 5,000 euro. And if the overall budget is not 100,000, then the 5,000 is way too much. So do it small, and then expand. And the next one, so the Swiss universities have a system which they adhere to very, very strongly. So it's first Europe and the US and maybe Japan if they really strongly believe in the portfolio. And then it's the second one is more, and it's been paid for by the licensee. So it needs to be a startup already.
Okay, that is very concrete example. Thank you very much. I don't know if any of you want to comment on if you should patent or not. I'd just like to recall that only 3 people know how to make pastéis de Belém. So that is perhaps an example that, but they have been running for decades, which jokes aside, I don't know if you want to comment on the patenting, if we should patent or not in those cases, but definitely about geography. Who wants to start, Joana or Nuno?
I mean, with regards to geography, because I work in life sciences, we always think that we should patent everywhere. I think there's only one location, well, two actually. One is Taiwan for geopolitical reasons. If you submit in Taiwan, then China thinks that you recognize Taiwan as a country, then you'll have issues with China. So it has in the past generated issues. The other is India. I mean, you can patent there, but they just don't care. So it is what it is. And of course, they do have a strong generics industry there if you're in pharma, and now they're also growing the biosimilars. So but I'm a strong believer that you should, from the get-go, patent, I mean, as much as possible everywhere, but I do agree with you. I think that the big markets are the ones that you should go after. The US, Japan for sure also, and Europe. I just had something to add to the point, or to the question, should we patent everything or not? I think that if you have a process to develop a product that will eventually also generate other products, and if you're selling just the product and the first technology is an enabler, you shouldn't. Because what you're doing is showing others how to, generate, because you have no control over production. Just you make some tweaks and just some small adjustments. And then, of course, we all end up litigating, right? We've seen that before. I think it's a strategy that IT companies have been using, which is you only patent what everybody's going to be finding out if they open and do reverse engineering, which is something much harder to do in biotech, because if you develop all these different antibodies, you can understand the sequence, but how to put it together, the conformation, for example, of an antibody, it's harder to do. So, for example, if you have this process of developing new antibodies for these specific different types of target, just patent the final product. And because then otherwise you're just cutting out your biggest source of income. So that would just be my input. But of course, as Claas was saying, of course, if you lose some of these people, it's very hard. And it's always very hard to put NDAs and CDAs in place with employees, especially in Portugal, because you need to pay them, you need to give them different sorts of. You need to put them in a particular setting that I don't think people are very comfortable with. But I do think that you.
Do you want to expand a bit more on that?
I mean, if you have people working with you and they know that what they're working on is confidential. And if they're being harassed, in a good way, if they're being approached by different competitors, right, and then they decided to leave, they know how to do that, it's not patented, they go to other companies. Then you say, no, I mean, you cannot go because you have this exclusivity, you cannot go. You cannot do that in Portugal.
Yes.
And then if they go, and even if they do have NDAs, they can just change it and then just make some small adjustments to the technology, and you have no way of understanding what they're doing. So there is this concern. But I am a strong believer that in specific areas, and I've seen that in Big Pharma because I've worked in Big Pharma for many years, what you do, I'm not saying that I like this approach. In big companies, it's something that they can do. You segregate teams, and nobody actually knows the final recipe. Some guys know how to do this, the other guys know how to do that. They have no clue. But I don't think that for biotech this makes sense. Again, but if you can produce as much as possible things that you can patent without having to patent the first one, I would try to push it. It is a risk, yes, but overall, I think it's worth at least considering.
Joana, you want to add?
Yeah, so first, it's important for us to remember that in principle, different IP rights protect different things and give you different rights. So, and And patents are designs for technical solutions, for technical problems, when reverse engineering is very easy. So you need to find a way to protect your product. And that's why we have a lot of patents. For process patents, it's possible, it's common, but in our experience is the last resource. If we get to litigation with a process patent, it's almost impossible. So we don't have, if we go to court with a process patent, we need to guarantee that we have access to all the steps that, for instance, a generic company follows in the factory. So it's really difficult to enforce a process patent. Of course, we can...
Do you know any examples where this
I
has...
will not talk about it.
No.
No, but I can say something in general terms. Of course, if we have a very well drafted process patent, for instance, where the final product has a fingerprint, for example, so we can be very certain that the alleged infringer uses our process, because we can take the final product, find that footprint, and say, you necessarily follow these steps, use my process, and is a very easy way to prove infringement. So there is something. So there is a strategy behind it. It's something that needs to be discussed. It's possible, and sometimes we just need to consider, even if we have a process patent, the strategy sometimes is not to disclose everything. Not in Europe, you don't need to say what is the perfect temperature, or it's different. It can be different in different jurisdictions. Okay, so it's really an orchestra to make everything work in this scenario. Something that I think it's also important to discuss, and on the patent drafting, and we have discussed the quality of the patent drafting and all these patents, is something about ownership, IP ownership. Sometimes when we are at this stage of doing due diligences, big discussions on the due diligence process is how well it was, how clear it was, the ownership, because of there is a lot of collaboration, a lot of people. There is students working in invention. There was PhD working on invention, so a lot of things. And sometimes we get to a deal, and we have a condition precedent saying that this deal will not be closed because of a problem on IP ownership. And there is something that I think that it's very easy to solve, at least to have for, if we go to technology transfer officer universities, they have more experience, okay? They are prepared for that. But biotech companies or pharma companies in Portugal, they don't have real IP policies. They don't have regulations. They don't have, even for trade secrets, to keep. So you need to have a policy. If you have a trade secret that is important, you need to guarantee that you have a good contract. You need to guarantee that you have a policy there. And I don't believe, according at least from my experience, that the majority of small, medium-sized biotech companies don't have it. Universities, yes, but not yet in the biotech field with respect to small companies.
Well, that may be a point that we haven't thought about discussing, but that's actually very, very relevant. The ownership. So in Portugal, if it's academia, the ownership is institutional. Although the rights to the inventors are, I think, in most cases, pretty well defined, which also helps on making the deals. I think in other countries or in specific situations, the ownership goes to the inventors, and I think that's when things start going a bit complex. But also, and maybe Claas can also add in your experience, also when we have too many institutions because of the collaborations, how does it work? What advices would you bring?
Interinstitutional agreements, very common in the trade, and one institution has the hat on, as they say, and does all the decisions, which is usually the one with the highest share of ownership, and then it gets really easy. And to the other point, this is obviously a topic that you encounter a lot in academic inventions. One of the inventors is a student, not a PhD, employed, whatever salary. So usually the connection is the salary or the employment contract. If one of the inventors is not employed, then they're partially an owner. And there's a very, very easy way to solve that problem, because at least under German law, and I think these laws are the same in all of Europe, if you have shared ownership, you also have shared costs. And then you tell them, look, this is going to cost you 10,000, or this is going to cost everyone 10,000, your part is 2,000, please pay, then the problem is usually solved. So, and I would just like to add one thing, excuse my intersection here, on the topic of process patents. I agree to everything that you said, but keeping in mind where we are and what the sort of the expected probability of some of the inventions is, there are a lot of, I've seen even in the panels that I've been part of here in these contests over the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of process-oriented inventions, like improving biosynthetic pathways and so forth. This is not as glamorous as making $1 billion exit to a big pharma company. And of course, this is the model that we all have, or that everyone aspires to, which happens very, very, very rarely. And again, I come back to the topic of luck. Improving a process by, let's say, 40% of cost is a huge win for whoever does the process. It's very likely also a win for the public, because something gets cheaper. And it's, from a patent point of view and from a technology transfer point of view, a relatively easy thing to achieve. So if I were somewhere here to take a decision on patenting or on funding a project, as I have been in the last couple of days, my bias will be in favor of process patents or process inventions. Not because they're the best thing that we could aspire to, but because they're a realistic achievement that puts the whole ecosystem onto the next level.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure how much time do I have, because I see here 35, but I see here 15, so just to know, because I will have a few more questions and I would like to open to the audience. 20 minutes, okay, great. So maybe we can have a couple of more questions and then pass to the audience. Nuno, I'd like to go back to the role of the employees, because as we said in universities, it is quite clear what are the benefits for an inventor, who is an employee, as a researcher, a professor, or a paid PhD student. But in companies, although the law is a bit broad, what are the strategies that biotech companies have been using in these cases?
It seems like it's different from my biotechs, at least from Joana's experience. I have ownership, IP already addressed in the contract from the get-go, okay, since CellMaps in 2019. And I do think that, and we do have here some of the investors that are also scientists, and I think that we were invested by venture capital. Venture capital is very much aware of the need to protect the IP that is being produced in biotechs. I mean, I assume that there are, more other biotech companies that are spin-offs or smaller companies that eventually need to bootstrap as much as possible. So eventually they reach out to lawyers that, usually do those typical employment agreements. or you know, ask for accountants for templates to do their own P&L. I get that, but I think that we're now getting to a point where we're getting much more professionalized, much more sophisticated. I think that these events and these discussions that we're having actually are proof of that. But yeah, I mean, in our case, to your point, we make sure that everything that we do is owned by the company, of course. We unlicensed, for example, at CellMabs, we unlicensed from Nova, but then we developed, we generated 2 additional patents.
Your own IP.
I myself, as an inventor, I also gave away my rights as an inventor, as well as the other inventors. And it was already clear. I mean, what we need then to do is give them part of the ownership by giving them stock options. That's the idea. You can get ownership by
and have
doing
everything sought beforehand. That's
exactly.
a good advice. One thing that I've also seen in some companies in Portugal is that they don't like so much to enter into licensing agreements. So when there is collaboration, they would prefer to have the ownership the entire ownership of the IP if they are collaborating with a research institution or with a smaller company. And that's something that I've seen, and if the benefits are clear, some institutions are okay with that. But I'd like to ask Claas what you have seen, because you have been working with a lot of universities. Is it something that you also have seen? Do you see advantages in this model, or having co-ownership and licensing? Is it a more common?
Co-ownership of the company or the patent?
For example, when you are working a small company with a big company, or a university with a big company, and something is co-developed, is it co-ownership, or you have other models?
So the universities that I work for insist on ownership.
But do you think that other models facilitate then industrialization? This is
If there is a company involved, then there is a very unequal distribution of potential marketing channels, if you will, and so there's also an unequal distribution of power. And in order to guarantee some kind of participation for the company, for the academic partner, then the academic partner tends to insist on ownership. Mm-hmm. So this is the Fraunhofer model. I don't know if you know, this is the largest sort of public research, for industry research organization. I don't like them at all from their behavior in the space, but it seems that much experience has informed this stance. Usually what is really important is that there is a very clear pathway to who gets to make the decision and how is the money distributed. Mm-hmm. And everything else is subject to contracts, mm-hmm. and the most important thing is clarity. Again, the experience tells me that academia tends to insist on their ownership because they can't really do anything with it.
Yeah, that's a point it could be an independent discussion, because it's the US model is that if the research is funded by public money, then universities have to keep the ownership so that they can be the ones making sure that the invention is for the benefit of the society. This is the rule. So it's not that they are insisting just because of... And in Europe, we don't have those rules, but we have different models happening in different countries and even in the same country where the university can give up on the ownership if the benefits can be yeah, if you
I have one more comment. So this plays into a different situation, which is very, very closely related, that probably occurs almost every time that you spin out something. There's very often a plea or the request on part of the company that is to be funded or on part of their investors to transfer the ownership from the university to the startup. And the reason that is usually given is that this is the only way this is fundable or whatever. This is something that at least the German and Swiss academic institutions categorically deny, have for a long time. The most experienced ones are the ones that most categorically deny this, and there's good reasons for it. And the reason is that ownership of the basic patents that were generated in academia, ownership of these patents by the spin-out makes the spin-out very, brings it under the control of the investors. The investors, of course, should have a lot of control because they're giving the money, but there's often situations, the second, third round, where at the end of the financing cycle, they say, look, we're going to destroy you if you don't agree to a down round or whatever. And they can dramatically change the power and remuneration structure in the company. So it is in the interest of the academic inventors who will eventually, if they're really successful, probably not end up as the CEOs of a stage 4 pharma company. It is in their interest to leave at least the base patent control at the university.
And actually this connects very well with my last question before opening to the audience, so you can comment on what was said, and which is how does patenting affect the public access to technologies? And this is a very good example on how the ownership will dictate if there would be public access or not to a technology in the end. But there are other examples. So, and in Portugal we have had some examples of these, of IP that could have originated new drugs, and it didn't, but not because the drugs were proven ineffective, but because the development time exceeded a certain limit, and it wouldn't make sense for an investor to put more money in that project, or for some reasons the money was not there, and the round of investment was not didn't happen, and in the end this was technology that was not put out there for the benefit of the public. So any of you want to comment what was comment by Claas or this example to wrap up this first part, and then we go to the audience?
Maybe I can add that when you have a patent, it's given to you, and the idea behind it is to be exploited directly or indirectly through licensing, for example. But it's not just about IP. So in practice, it's about the technology and the development to reach the market. So when you have license agreements, for instance, you need to be clear on defining the development and commercialization efforts and milestones. So you need not only to, if you are the patentee, a public institution, and you are licensing, you need to have in your contract these milestones. You need to have staff prepared and in number enough to auditing all of these milestones, and you need to have like a clause guaranteeing that you can reverse. It can be reversed. So you will not be dependent of this exclusive licensee. You have that time to decide, okay, you're not going to be the one that are going to exploit invention. I will select a different party. So, and that's important in terms of contracts. Something that is also important is we shouldn't forget that a patent is it's a property. So it's a constitutional right in Portugal, for example. But it's not the only right at stake. So you have other rights, constitutional rights. And the idea is for this invention to have a social impact, a social benefit. And if we look at all this discussion on sustainability and even social sustainability, if you have a patent that you are not exploiting and you do not intend to exploit, you will also, in principle, aligned with sustainability goals, you will try to not to enforce it against third parties. So it's also important not to have patents. Of course, you have defensive patents. You have non-practicing entities. We have all of this. It's a big discussion, a separate discussion. But in principle, if we have patents, we are not exploiting them. We would need to have in our minds all this United Nations idea of sustainability. And it's also important on IP because the whole goal is to foster innovation, and we should not forget the basics of the IP systems.
So if a company has SDGs implemented, it shouldn't be a problem.
No, I believe that it would be very important if a company wants to be well rated on sustainability goals, IP should not be forgotten.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. That's a very good point. Thank you. Nuno, you want to comment or?
But just that I was looking at your question from a different angle. So, for example, the access to patients that cannot afford a specific product because it's really expensive and companies are protected, and so there's no way we can have generics at lower prices or biosimilars for that matter. And I was just thinking, for example, of Keytruda, right? Pembrolizumab from Merck. The patent it's gonna be ending in 2028. They've just launched a new version that can be administered subcutaneously to bypass the end of the patents, and so they're going to be transferring patients for that. Of course, that doesn't mean that companies cannot, at this point now, produce biosimilars and eventually reduce the costs and eventually increase the access of patients to that technology. But I think that your question is very interesting, especially in pharma, where several companies try to lock some of their innovations, sometimes because they have products still in the market that they intend to continue to be very profitable. They delay the launch of innovations because they still have their own portfolio making a lot of money. And nobody can do it, because even though people have tried to in the past, because they have patents protecting what they still have in the market. So I think that there is this issue with patenting that, it's of course a problem.
I think we could have a whole panel on this question. Yes. It's like it's called evergreening also in patent rights. So this having a lot of patents, and my experience that you have patents, you have a system, you need to use the system. That's the IP management, and there are legal frameworks that protect this kind of, if it's really an abuse of right. If it's against antitrust laws, we are well protected in this respect. So I don't see it as a bypass in principle. So it's like if we have a different formulation, subcutaneous use or a fixed dose combination, in principle, if the patent was granted, if there is a new invention subject to a different patent, if it was granted, and so the company should have the exclusive right with respect to that invention. And if it is not a new invention, in fact, if it is, if it was not well granted, we have courts to decide that. So it's possible to try to revoke that patent, and it's also to raise antitrust issues if that is the case. And
but that's a way also to avoid the price erosion of products. AbbVie did the same, so it's kind of a common practice.
As you see, it could be a different roundtable. What I'm just, it's a strategy It's IP management, it's management of patent portfolio and exclusive rights and costs. I completely agree. What I'm saying is if we focus on patents, you can use the system and there is ways to, if you are a third party that think that the patent should not be granted or the exclusive right should not have been granted, there is ways for you to fight that. Of course, we can also discuss the courts and costs and everything, but I think it's a very interesting discussion.
Okay, thank you so much. So is there questions in the audience? Celia, is there a microphone or? So there. We can take 2 or 3 questions in a row. So if there is any other question, please raise your hand. If not, we will just...
Okay, I'll start. I'll try to make this very brief for you, because the problem I'm going to put on the table is broad. So in the past few years, maybe probably in the last 2 years, the world has changed completely with Gen AI coming up. And that means that data is becoming incredibly important. So data is the product nowadays. And that means that we need to think of what is really IP protection, as we've seen with all these litigations with the big companies now using data that shouldn't be used. And I wonder, so this is a problem. Now, for university, how do you protect knowledge when your academics publish everything and everything needs to be immediately accessible so that people can reproduce the publication data? For a company, for an entrepreneur, are you already planning your data strategy? Because data is the product now. So are you planning your data strategy for Valvian? And for our IP specialists, are you already working with companies and actually setting up their data protection strategy? Particularly, and now this is for the two of you, so I work in human health. And my big problem is that a lot of the data that I have has a very specific ethical consent that can be used for one specific purpose. And what we're seeing in the space is that startups are being acquired not for the products they have, but for the data they own. So all the ethical protection of the data is gone. So now the new company does whatever they want to do with it. So awesome.
Thank you so much for bringing this, Jose. Yeah, from a university perspective, I'm not sure that the problem is the pace of public, well, not making data public, because it's not so different when we talk about real publications. I think the main problem is to convince scientists that they need to organize the data in ways that they are readable and accessible and also potentially protected. And I think we are a bit far away from that. So it's starting to be the focus of research management, but we are still lagging behind, very, very honest. And I think this is where universities need to invest and then think about how this can be protected and can be used for value generation in different ways. But I'm sure that our experts in IP have.
I can say something. I'm not an expert in data protection, but I can say that you brought to this is one of the most important discussions, more than IP. I was in an event last week in London, and we were discussing Brussels, the policy in Brussels, and it's all about data. At the end, it will be, and I agree that it will be about what we will see in court. It's data litigation, and what I can say, and I think I started to say that patents, they are not the only way to protect. To protect inventions. You need to consider databases where you have data. You need to consider source code and data. If you start to read, it's possible to protect some with copyright. It's even when you have databases, you can also protect it. But you also need to guarantee the compliance with all the regulations that we are aware of. So I don't have a solution I don't have a clear reply to that question, but I think that you just posed one of the most important questions for us, researchers, lawyers, as a community. So I think probably we'll need a roundtable on that.
Sure,
I find it a little bit tasking to not be too specific in order not to discuss clients stuff. I would say there's two ways to address this issue. One is if you access public databases. So if there's, let's say, a database on the genomic variety of certain patients, and that associates the patient data with outcome, and the database is public. And what you're doing is you come up with an algorithm or a testable method that is enabled in a technical way. So there's stuff that you need to touch. For instance, sequencing kit, in order to process that information. That is patentable, and the fact that you found a new way to associate outcome and genetic basis would make this probably novel and inventive. So here the database is public, and you can access it. So there's no concern in my view. Even if the patients that were the basis of these data had given their consent, not for you to patent, but just to be examined and then have put their data out in the public space, probably without association to the name, because that's the main problem of these databases, that you must not find the actual individual identity of the patient. So here, patentability, yes. Marketability, yes. The second issue is if you have a new idea, if you have a relatively small subset of patients with or without consent, or you start seeing an association in mice and you want to take this to the human level, and you don't have this large database and you want to train a model, then my advice would be to patent on whatever little you have. And here, in my view, the essence of success is speed. And we've seen this in all of the internet plays, and now the internet play is coming to diagnostic medicine. The faster you are in accessing a lot of people with your new device or your new method, the faster you are to gather data, the more robust your algorithm will be then that you can patent on the basis of these data. And keep in mind, I mean, you taught me this probably more than I could ever tell you. The accuracy of the algorithm deviates from 20 to 50 patients, but the deviation becomes ever smaller as you progress into larger patient numbers. So my advice would be to just try and hit the right patient number, and go with that.
Well, just answering your question from my side at Valvian. So well, by the way, picking up on what you just said earlier, we all take advantage of the system, right? Doesn't mean that we know exactly what we're getting at with all of these different strategies. And in that case, specifically, to your point, we're generating new data, our own data, looking at it from our perspective, taking into consideration what we've learned in the past, and it seems like what actually enabled us to to do what we did was the way we approached it and the data that we were able to generate that actually put us in that direction. So the idea now is to map patients, profile patients, looking at them from different perspectives, and then relate it with already available information. There's no need to invent the wheel. I think that we should look at different repositories. There's just an issue there, and I've said that, and we've been discussing that at length, which is the data in the public repositories is not correct. There's a huge bias there. I do think that most of that issue that Isabel, you were talking about with researchers and data, sometimes, and I'll be completely unpopular here, and I've seen that, we see so many research that only works in the hand of the operator. That tells us a lot, right? That's why people tend to try to protect as much as possible, because they know that nobody will be able to replicate that. That's a problem. So whatever is public out there, I think we should try to curate that information as much as possible, to then cross-reference it with what we have been developing so that we can see our own patterns. If we patent it, no. The idea is to find new targets, and I do think that biotechs have a different responsibility from universities. We've been discussing here in talking about the role, or in a way, the role of universities, how we patent, how we look at these different strategies. Biotechs are all about making sure that products reach the market and that we are able to provide profit for our investors. Of course, we as biotech investors, we do have, or at least we tend to think that we have a moral compass and that we are much better from our investors. But at the end of the day, we have investors, we have shareholders. We need to make sure that whatever we're producing will be successful, generate profit, which is something different from universities, as you know. So we need to implement something that will allow us to move forward, to launch products that are successful, protecting only what we know makes sense to protect, so that, and most of the patents are protective, right? We want to make sure that we are protected throughout the process. And I do think that at Valvian, the idea is to patent the products. If we patent and start showing to everybody how we're getting to different products, then we get to that point where we don't know who's doing things violating your own patents. So we'll have the possibility to protect the products down the line, and we cannot be spending money on everything that we're doing. Just today we have something cool, let's patent it. It's good for patent attorneys, right? But we need to make sure that we make our own decisions, because at the end of the day, whoever wants to break it, they will. So.
Okay, I think we need to end now, because maybe if there are other questions, maybe they can ask during they can be asked during the coffee break. So I think lots of different tips and topics were addressed here. So thank you so much for bringing your expertise for this discussion. I hope you have enjoyed. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day.